Hi, I'm Jocelyn from the ketoathlete.org. So I ate only meat and no plants and no fiber for the month of January, and I'm here to tell you how it went. So a little background about me. My name's Jocelyn. I'm 36. I'm married. I have 2 kids. I've been following a cyclic ketogenic diet since January of 2017. I've been doing CrossFit since 2008. And I've been logging and posting and blogging what that's like to follow a low-carb, high-fat diet while doing a high-intensity sport on a website called theketoathlete.org and on an Instagram account called The Keto Athlete. So here's what I was doing before. So I've been keto for 3 years, loving it. About 80% animal-based keto. September of 2019, so 4 months before starting this carnivore experiment, I eliminated leafy greens and almonds as an experiment to get rid of oxalates and see how that would affect things. That experiment went great, reducing those plant toxins in my diet, eliminated some chronic back pain that I've had for close to 10 years since I had my first baby, and also finally made my skin clear up. I'd had terrible, deep, painful breakouts along my jawline for just years and years, as long as I can remember. I've had laser treatments and topicals and all kinds of things to try to get it to go away, and it never did. But turns out just getting rid of leafy greens and almonds, the oxalate foods, totally cleared that up. So I am now happily wearing no foundation, no cover-up, and enjoying my healthy skin. So after eliminating leafy greens and almonds, I was still eating some low oxalate plant foods, macadamia nuts, some vegetables like celery and cucumbers and that sort of thing. As it was World Carnivore Month for January of 2020, I thought it was worth an experiment to just see what would happen if I only ate animal foods. So here's what were the staples of my diet: red meat, eggs, a bulletproof coffee every day of butter and MCT oil. Still had some chicken, fish, pork, a little bit throughout the month, and a few recipes that involved cream or cheese, although I try not to do much for dairy. The only non-animal food I had was full-fat coconut cream, as I've been experimenting trying to make a coconut cream yogurt in my Instant Pot. So that's the only non-animal source of calories that I had, but it still was all fat and no plant matter or fiber or anything. So other things I eliminated, like I said, all of the nuts, all vegetables, all industrial seed oils, so no vegetable oils from things like salad dressings or mayonnaise, no fried foods, like even some keto things like chicken wings and things like that in a restaurant are, technically low carb and high fat, but full of these industrial seed oils. Also, to make it pure, had no cheat days. I've always had a cheat day on a Saturday the whole time I've been keto, cycled out of ketosis at least once a week. So no cheat days, no sugar, entirely animal-based for the whole month. And no fiber. So that was kind of the crazy thing. What I added, organ meats, especially liver. I've been trying to eat liver every day. I've been eating about a third of an ounce of raw liver every day, and then cooking pureed liver in with any time I had ground beef or things like that, trying to hide it in different recipes, which I've actually posted some recipes on theketoathlete.org to hide more liver. Other things, I added bone broth. I've been making lots of both beef and chicken bone broth and adding it to recipes, anything that calls for stock or broth, and even drinking cups of it sometimes too. So great for all the nutrients that come out of the bones and also the electrolytes. It's a high salt thing, so keeping the sodium up there too. So getting into the subjective measurements, how I felt about some of these things. So cravings, this one actually totally surprised me. I had like none. I've always, this whole time, even though I've the last 3 years managed to stick to keto, always had those cheat days on a Saturday and always kind of looked forward to them. They were always in the back of my mind. The first couple of weekends of January that went by and there was, no treats and no sugar and no meals out, I barely even noticed, which was awesome for me. I feel like that finally that little, monkey in the back of your mind that makes you want to eat crappy food was just totally gone. So that was great. My health. This one was super cool. I didn't get sick. Through December and January, I traveled a lot. I think I counted, I was through 10 different airports, and I didn't get sick. This is the first time through this winter, and knock on wood, because the winter's not done, that I haven't gotten a horrible flu or a terrible cold. So that was super awesome. And also, apparently I no longer have asthma. I've had an asthma inhaler since I was in 3rd grade, and it usually gets especially bad in the winter, to the point that I'm using my inhaler every single day. I always have it in my purse, and I noticed a little while ago, I said to my husband, I haven't used my inhaler this whole winter. I even worked out in a gym with a dog while we were on holidays, which I could normally never do. I would just die of an asthma attack, and I was totally fine. So I don't know what that means, but whatever low-level respiratory inflammation I've been living with since I was a kid is apparently gone now. So that's amazing to me. Energy levels, very energetic, very clear-headed, totally stable. I felt awesome, just sort of a general sense of like vigor and extra energy, attacked lots of projects throughout the month of January. Gym performance, totally unchanged. I felt fine, no difference, no bonking, nothing where I felt like I was lacking any energy. Digestion, this is what people want to know. So you ate no fiber. How are the boobs? Totally fine. Thanks for asking. Fiber is unnecessary to maintain regular digestion, as far as I can tell. Everything was totally normal and basically unchanged. I did feel less bloated, so sort of a roundness or a general protrusion that I've always had to my lower abdomen that I just attributed to that's how my body looks now after I've had 2 kids. That just kind of went away, and everything just felt like a little bit flatter and tighter, and so that was cool. Digestion felt great. So that's all subjective stuff, which could be very prone to a placebo effect, going into something and being like, I feel great. So I tried to measure objectively as many things as I could to take the placebo effect out of it and see how my body and its systems actually responded to a diet of all meat and no plants. So we're going to start with my body weight, step on the scale. That one's easy. I've been very stable at 130 pounds for about 2.5 years, basically since I went through the first few months of keto. But I lost 6 pounds this month without trying to, wasn't meaning to. I was perfectly fine at 130 pounds, but accidentally leaned out to 124. So that's cool. Not a substantial amount of weight, but that's a fair bit on someone. I'm only 5 feet tall and wasn't trying to lose weight and already started off fairly lean. So that was interesting. My blood glucose. So for the last 2 weeks of this experiment, I wore a Freestyle Libre continuous glucose monitor, an implant in the back of my arm that takes continuous blood glucose measurements. So this is what that chart looks like. Very stable, very boring. It has an estimated A1C on here of 4.1%, which if that's accurate would be very good. I'm going to get blood work done next week. Unfortunately, couldn't get into my doctor any sooner. So I will verify that with some actual blood work when I can. So we see here what this chart looks like. Very stable. Is that I have my target on my little monitor here set between 3.9 and 5.5 millimolars, which for the Americans out there is between 70 and 99 milligrams per deciliter. My average was exactly at the low end of that target, which is 3.9 or 70. I spent 56% of the time in that target, 42% of the time below that target, and 2% of the time above that target. So I only spent 2% of the time above with a blood sugar above 99 milligrams per deciliter or above 5.5. Now, what do those numbers mean? What would be normal? Normal for a person of fasting blood glucose below 100 or below 5.5 is considered normal. Above 100, you're getting diabetic or pre-diabetic. Postprandial, after you eat, as high as 140 would be considered normal within the 2 hours after eating, which is 7.8. That 2% of the time, though, that I was above what is considered the threshold of fasting blood glucose, that 2% of the time did not involve eating. So that 2% of the time was from exercise. So this was immediately after doing a 20-minute CrossFit workout, a high-demand gymnastics workout with some heavy barbell lifting in there too. And I saw this was the highest blood glucose I had recorded during the 2 weeks was 7.8. And I had done this workout fasted. So I thought this was super cool that my body, my liver has got me covered when there is a high demand for glucose. It's there when you need it. And then the rest of the time, when it's not needed, we're running on other sources of fuel. So you don't lose the ability to produce or burn sugar. You just also develop this metabolic flexibility to run on other fuels. which are ketones. So I took some random samples of ketone measurements throughout the month, different times of day. They were always over 1, and I had some of the highest recorded ketone measurements I've ever had, especially considering I was eating the whole time. None of this was fasting. I never fasted for more than maybe 20 hours the whole month. So some nice high measurements. I also thought this was interesting. If we look at how high these ketone numbers are, some people out there say that a carnivore diet is not a ketogenic diet, which for me at least is obviously not the case. It's definitely a very ketogenic diet. And when ketones are present, the body does not produce nearly the amount of blood glucose. So where people say that glucose is the preferred fuel, it really isn't, because when ketones are available, blood glucose is very low, to the point that my average blood glucose of 70 or 3.9 millimolars would be considered a hypoglycemic event to a person that did not have metabolic flexibility, or a person that was diabetic or having trouble managing their blood sugars. But my blood sugars run that low all the time, and I feel fine because there's plenty of fatty acids being burned and turned into ketones, providing plenty of fuel for my brain, for my heart, for my muscles, all the things that need to work, which is part of why my energy felt great and clear-headed and stable, and I felt very productive this whole month. I like being in ketosis. So here's some other things. All the rest of this data comes from my Oura ring, taking measurements all the time. I wear this little ring all the time. It's got some little sensors inside, which is awesome. So it takes data all day long and then all night while I sleep. So the first one is resting heart rate, a measure of cardiovascular fitness and also recovery. So my average, I've had this Oura ring for a year. So this is my average from 2019. My average resting heart rate while I was sleeping was 53, but during the month of January 2020, my average was 49. So that's an 8% improvement. And I thought this was interesting because it's January and I live in Canada, so I haven't been moving around as much. I normally average over 15,000 steps a day, sometimes closer to 17,000 in the summer. For the month of January, I was just over 12,000 steps a day, so not moving nearly as much. So this improvement in cardiovascular fitness and my resting heart rate was not because of any extra exercise or movement or anything like that. Deep sleep. So deep sleep is your most restorative stage of sleep. It's when you produce the majority of your growth hormone. So it's most important for muscle growth and repair and recovery. So this I thought was awesome. My average was 2 hours and 9 minutes, which is already quite high. Average for an adult my age would be an hour to an hour and a half. But my average in January was 2 hours and 41 minutes, which was a 25% improvement. Now, to be fair, I did spend 8 more minutes asleep. My average sleep time was 7 hours and 35 minutes in January, where previously it had been 7 hours and 27 minutes. So I spent 8 more minutes asleep, but I spent 32 more minutes in deep sleep, which is the important stuff. So that was great. Heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is a measurement of the space between your heartbeats. And that variability, that time, the difference in those times should be high. You want more variability. It indicates a responsive balance between your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. So your fight or flight systems or your rest and digest system. So the more responsive, the better. The higher your heart rate variability, the better. So Oura takes 2 measurements. One is your average while you're sleeping. So my average heart rate variability is 74. And during the carnivore month was 100. And this was awesome. That's a 35% improvement. So that indicates that my balance between recovery and stress responses is really, really good. And it also takes a peak. So it takes continuous measurements throughout the night. And I saw some of the highest heart rate variability numbers I've ever seen, with peak numbers in the 230s and 240s, which was great. So here's the conclusion. What do we have? How did my carnivore month go? I got leaner. I feel healthier. My skin, my joint pain, I didn't get sick. I apparently no longer have asthma. Like I said, my skin cleared up. That feels great. I don't have back pain. I had no cravings. Super stable blood glucose, like really stable. I slept way better, way more deep sleep, better heart rate variability, better recovery as indicated through lower resting heart rate, increased heart rate variability. So what's the worst I could say? Was there any downside? About the worst I could say is it's maybe a bit boring. just eating animal foods is maybe a bit boring, but it's made me step outside of my culinary comfort zone and try new things and try to cook new things and pick up different cuts of meat and try to make them more interesting. So I don't think it has to be boring. It doesn't have to be just chicken and steak and eggs and back and forth. I've expanded my culinary interest with trying to cook lots of things. Would I keep doing this? Would I stay carnivore? I don't see any reason to add any vegetables or plants back into my diet. It certainly was of no negative consequence to take them out. The only thing I would say I really miss is like macadamia nuts. I would eat those every morning. And I kind of miss like crunchy foods. So I could see occasionally just for that sort of texture crunch factor of like, some celery or carrots or crunchy kinds of foods. But health-wise and how I feel and everything, I see no need to add any plant matter back into my diet. If you have any questions, post them below. I'll do my best to answer everything. Thanks for watching.